Something remarkable has just unfolded, and I'm not referring to the bombs dropping on Tehran. I'm not referring to vessels ablaze in the Persian Gulf. I'm not referring to oil reaching $100 a barrel or the Strait of Hormuz basically becoming impassable. I'm talking about something far more significant, something that almost never occurs in contemporary geopolitics. The United States of America, the planet's most formidable military power, has gone to war, and hardly anyone has joined them. Pause and absorb that for a moment. Not Saudi Arabia, not the UAE, not Qatar, not Spain, not France, not the United Kingdom, not in any offensive capacity. All of these nations, long-standing Washington partners, some bound by decades of defense pacts, some hosting American bases on their territory, have essentially responded with the same two words: count us out. What is unfolding before our eyes in real time is not merely a conflict with Iran. It represents a rupture in America's worldwide alliance framework on a scale we haven't witnessed in a generation, possibly longer. And what stands out most is that Washington's reaction has not been outreach or negotiation. It has been blunt, unfiltered, publicly televised threats directed at its own allies. That is the real story. That is what this unraveling concerns. And by the end, you will grasp not only what took place this week, but why it carries consequences for every nation, every economy, and every individual who fills a car or shops for food. Stick with me, this becomes far more intense before it becomes clearer. If you haven't yet subscribed to Daily Brief, tap that button now. Events are moving rapidly, and you will want to catch every update. Let's step back, not years, not decades, just a few weeks, to February 28, 2026. That was the date American and Israeli forces initiated what the White House labeled Operation Epic Fury, a wave of synchronized attacks on Iran, including its capital Tehran, aimed at ballistic missile facilities, naval assets, proxy groups, and nuclear-related locations. The supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, perished in those initial strikes. That single event marks the starting point. And here is the crucial piece mainstream reporting continues to overlook. Before launching those attacks, Washington never consulted its Gulf partners, never contacted Riyadh, never briefed Abu Dhabi, never met with Doha. The United States and Israel proceeded alone, and the Gulf countries, the ones living next door to the fighting, the ones whose cities would face immediate reprisals, whose airspace would be contested, whose oil facilities would be struck, learned about it the same way everyone else did, through news broadcasts. So when Iranian missiles and drones began striking Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, actual hits on Gulf energy infrastructure, including the Sheba oil field, one of Saudi Arabia's most vital revenue sources, and Bahrain's Bapco refinery, which declared force majeure, these nations weren't merely being invited to join a conflict. They were already suffering retaliation for a war they had never signed up for, and Washington's answer to their anger: threats. That sets the scene. Now let's dive in. Point number one. Senator Lindsey Graham appeared on national television and delivered what may be the most stunning example of alliance mishandling in decades. On the night of March 10, 2026, Graham joined host Sean Hannity on Fox News and devoted much of the hour to issuing warnings, explicit or heavily implied, to virtually every key American partner in the region and Europe: Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Spain, France, the United Kingdom. Let's quote him accurately because the precise language is important. On Spain: "To our friends in Spain, man, you have lost your way. I don't want to do business with you anymore. I want our air bases out of Spain and into a country that will let us use them." On Saudi Arabia: "Our embassy was hit in Riyadh. Do you not have an obligation to join the fight with us? You have yet to do that." He suggested that if an attack on the American embassy in Riyadh doesn't trigger mutual self-defense, maybe we shouldn't do a treaty with you. On the UAE, which had declared at the United Nations it would not take part in offensive actions, you said today publicly at the UN your country would not be used to join the fight against the Ayatollahs. On the Gulf broadly: "To our Arab friends, I've tried to help you construct a new Middle East. You need to up your game here. I can't go to South Carolina and say we're fighting and you won't publicly fight." And then came the truly astonishing part. Graham declared live on air, "God bless Israel. We should move all our stuff to Israel. I'm with Israel. I will be with Israel to my dying day." Stop right there. A sitting United States senator openly threatened to withdraw American bases from Spain, a NATO ally, hinted at canceling defense pacts with Saudi Arabia, demanded that independent nations send their troops into a war they were never asked about, and ended by pledging lifelong personal loyalty to another country, all in one television segment. What makes this even more extraordinary? According to reporting in the Jerusalem Post and the Wall Street Journal, Graham wasn't merely offering commentary. He himself acknowledged making several trips to Israel before the strikes, meeting Mossad officials and Prime Minister Netanyahu. He told the Wall Street Journal, "They'll tell me things our own government won't tell me." He said he advised Netanyahu on how to persuade Trump to greenlight the operation. Netanyahu then presented Trump with intelligence that Graham claims convinced the president to move forward. So we have a sitting senator who helped create the political groundwork for this war, now appearing on cable news to threaten allies who refuse to join it while simultaneously promising foreign governments mutual defense treaties and presidential-level commitments from a television studio. The backlash arrived swiftly, and not only from Democrats. Republican Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina, Graham's home state, posted publicly, "No boots on the ground. If Senator Graham wants to go fight in a foreign conflict, let him be the first to volunteer." She added that she had spoken with the administration several times and ground troops remained off the table. Meghan McCain, daughter of the late Senator John McCain and a conservative voice, wrote on X, "I am imploring anyone who will listen in the Trump administration to stop sending this man out as a surrogate. He is scaring people and doing damage to whatever message you're trying to sell to the American public about the Iran war." Former Fox News host Megyn Kelly asked directly, "When did Lindsey Graham become our president?" She pointed out that in a single 24-hour span, Graham had issued warnings to Lebanon, Cuba, Saudi Arabia, the broader Arab world, and Spain. Right-wing commentator Matt Walsh wrote, "Where does he think he derives the authority to unilaterally offer permanent defense agreements to foreign countries? Who exactly made this effeminate weirdo emperor of the world?" When members of your own political camp raise those questions openly, you face a messaging crisis far beyond surface appearance. Point number 1 received. Point number 2. The Gulf states aren't merely sitting out. They are actively obstructing Washington's military goals, and they are stating it openly at the United Nations and through prominent business voices that hold real influence in regional affairs. A U.S. official confirmed to Middle East Eye that Saudi Arabia has denied American forces access to its bases for offensive missions. Not speculation, official confirmation. Riyadh permits defensive positioning only, nothing offensive. Full stop. Iran's foreign minister stated publicly that Saudi officials had committed fully to preventing their territory, waters, or airspace from being used against Iran. Let that sink in. Iran's top diplomat openly confirming a pledge Saudi Arabia made to Tehran, not to Washington. The UAE's UN declaration that it would not participate in offensive operations was soon followed by a Saudi Foreign Ministry statement affirming that the kingdom retains its full right to take all necessary measures to safeguard its security, sovereignty, and the safety of its citizens and residents. Notice what it does not say. It does not declare solidarity with American partners. It asserts unilateral self-protection on its own terms. Pay close attention here. Emirati billionaire Khalifa Ahmed Al Habtoor, one of the UAE's most powerful business figures with close ties to Abu Dhabi and Dubai leadership, issued a public response directly addressing Graham's comments. This is not a marginal figure. His words reveal precisely why the Gulf is refusing to enter this conflict. Al Habtoor wrote that the Gulf states understand exactly why they are being attacked. He said they also know who pulled the entire region into this perilous escalation without consulting those he calls allies. He described American decision-making as reckless and stated the war was forced upon us by rival powers competing for regional dominance. He framed it clearly. In this conflict, Iran, Israel, and the United States act solely according to their own agendas, not the welfare of Middle Eastern Arab populations. He added, "The Gulf states value the lives of our sons, and we do not treat their souls as collateral damage as some do." He then turned to economics, quoting Graham's own Fox News remark that Venezuela and Iran together control 31% of global oil reserves, and regime change in Iran would bring the United States enormous wealth. Al Habtoor wrote, Only then does the picture become clearer, and only then do we understand why they want this war. He closed by saying, "You may be a senator in the U.S. Senate, but anyone who hears your statements might think you're a member of the Israeli Knesset, because you defend Israel's interests more than you defend the interests of the American people themselves." That public statement from a major Gulf business leader aimed at a U.S. senator is a historically weighty document. Not a tweet, not a hot take, but a reasoned case explaining why the Arab world will not follow America into this fight. It deserves to be taken seriously on its own merits. Point number 2, received. Pause for a second. If this breakdown is sharpening your grasp of what's really occurring, hit the like button. It helps Daily Brief reach more people trying to see past the headlines. Leave a comment sharing what you believe is the most underreported element of this story. We read everyone. Point number 3, this is the piece almost no one is linking properly, yet its implications reshape the entire strategic landscape. Russia is currently supplying active intelligence to Iran against American forces. NBC News, citing 4 sources with first-hand knowledge, reported that Moscow has been providing Iran with information on the location and movements of U.S. military assets in the Gulf. That account was later corroborated by other Western officials. UK Defense Secretary John Healey told reporters openly, "I think no one will be surprised to believe that Putin's hidden hand is behind some of the Iranian tactics and potentially some of their capabilities as well." Iran has launched more than 2,000 Shahed drones across the Middle East since February 28th. CNN reported that Russia has assisted Iran specifically with drone tactics honed through years of employing the same designs against Ukraine. The know-how accumulated over Kiev and Kharkiv is now being applied in the Persian Gulf against American targets. Ukrainian President Zelensky, who has offered Ukraine's drone defense expertise to U.S. forces, stated publicly that Russia is aiding Iran not only with UAVs but also with missiles and air defense systems. Consider that alignment for a moment. Ukraine assists the United States in countering Iranian drones, while Russia helps Iran launch and refine them. This is a proxy clash embedded within a wider war, and Washington seems only partly conscious of its full scope. What makes it truly striking? When asked directly on March 13th during a Fox News radio interview with Brian Kilmeade whether Putin was assisting Iran, Trump replied, "I think he might be helping them a little bit. Yeah, I guess. And he probably thinks we're helping Ukraine, right?" That is the President of the United States framing confirmed intelligence of an adversary targeting his own troops as a fair tit-for-tat exchange. They help, we help, all in fairness. On the very same day that story broke, the White House began floating the idea of easing sanctions on Russian oil. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told Fox Business, "We may unsanction further Russian oil. Trace the chain. Russia supplies intelligence used to target American forces. The resulting war and Hormuz closure drive oil prices upward. Russia's oil income surges. Its crude discount narrows as Asian buyers compete for supply. Washington contemplates lifting Russian oil sanctions to lower prices, which would further enrich Moscow. And throughout, Trump portrays Putin as someone who might want to be constructive. As European Council President Antonio Costa stated publicly, "So far, there is only one winner in this war, Russia. It gains new resources to finance its war against Ukraine. As energy prices rise, it profits from the diversion of military capabilities." Russia's ambassador to the UK, Andrei Kelin, told CNBC, "We still are trying to understand what are the goals of President Trump in this campaign. You know that lots of doubts have been expressed about the exit strategy that the American administration can have in this endeavor. That is Russia's envoy courteously posing the question every allied capital is asking quietly, what is the objective? When does it conclude? What does success look like? No clear response is emerging from Washington. Point number 3, received. Now let's bring this down to earth and examine what it means for the global economy and ordinary people, because that is where geopolitics either turns tangible or remains theoretical. The Strait of Hormuz is not an idea. It is a narrow waterway, roughly 21 miles across at its tightest point between Iran and Oman. Under normal conditions, about 20% of the world's oil flows through that single choke point. According to the International Energy Agency's latest monthly report released this week, the conflict has triggered the largest supply disruption ever recorded in the global oil market. The IEA has coordinated the release of 400 million barrels from strategic reserves across 32 member nations. The United States contributed 172 million barrels from its own strategic petroleum reserve. Experts told CNBC this offsets only a small portion of typical Hormuz volumes. Euronews reported Brent crude briefly spiked near $120 per barrel early in the conflict before retreating toward $100 after Trump suggested the war could end swiftly. Those assurances did not last. As of this week, Brent trades just above $100 per barrel, sharply higher than the mid-February level around $60 before the war started. West Texas Intermediate, the U.S. benchmark, sits just under $90. Iran's IRGC has been candid about its approach. Spokesman Ibrahim Zulfikari told state media, "Get ready for oil to be $200 a barrel because the oil price depends on regional security, which you have destabilized." Reuters reporting, echoed across outlets, indicates the threat is far from empty rhetoric. The IRGC declared any vessel tied to the United States, Israel, or their allies attempting to transit the strait would be deemed a lawful target. Shipping has virtually stopped. Al Jazeera reported at least 5 tankers damaged, 2 crew members killed, and roughly 150 vessels stranded near the strait. Time magazine noted the ripple effects reach well beyond petroleum. Urea prices, the dominant nitrogen fertilizer, have climbed 35% since February 28th. About 1/3 of global urea transits the Strait of Hormuz. Gulf producers account for nearly 49% of world urea exports and 30% of ammonia exports. American Farm Bureau economists warn that restricted fertilizer deliveries could lead farmers to apply less, lowering yields and raising food prices. That process is already underway. Roughly 8% of global aluminum production occurs in the Persian Gulf thanks to abundant energy. Smelters in Qatar and Bahrain have suspended shipments. Aluminum prices have reached their highest level in nearly 4 years, directly impacting costs for cars, aircraft, and consumer electronics. Helium, a natural gas byproduct essential for semiconductor fabrication and medical imaging, faces supply risk. Semiconductor disruptions raise prices for smartphones, laptops, and military electronics. CNBC reports the U.S. national average for regular gasoline now stands at $3.57 per gallon midweek, with analysts warning it could surpass $5 if the blockade continues. That is not an abstract financial figure. That is every drive to work, every supermarket trip, every home heating bill. And here is what the White House has now effectively admitted. No economic tool can fix this. A senior administration official told CNBC anonymously, "We expect these prices to come down significantly once the war is complete. The only path to lower energy prices is ending the conflict or reopening the strait by military force. Everything else is delay. Reserves can be released, sanctions can be waived, allies can be urged, but until the strait flows again, markets will not believe the crisis is resolved. This is a military problem requiring a military answer, and the true cost has not been clearly explained to the American people. Now consider the complete board, every player, every motive, every calculation. What does Iran seek? Iran is not aiming to defeat the combined military might of the United States and Israel. That is not the objective. Iran's strategy is to render the war prohibitively expensive to sustain. Every day the strait remains shut, the global economy bleeds. Every day oil stays elevated. Domestic political pressure on Trump intensifies. Every ally that refuses to join becomes evidence of growing American isolation. Iran is not trying to outlast the airstrikes. It is trying to make those airstrikes politically intolerable. Iran's newly appointed supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, son of the Ayatollah killed in the opening attacks, stated in his first public remarks since taking office that the Strait of Hormuz must stay closed as leverage against the enemy and that all U.S. military bases in the Middle East should shut down immediately, warning they would be targeted. NBC News reported oil prices jumped sharply right after that declaration. What does Russia seek? High oil prices, prolonged Western distraction from Ukraine, possible sanctions relief, and diminished American alliance credibility. It is securing all four at once. European Council President Costa put it bluntly, Russia is the war's first winner. What does China seek? The picture is nuanced but critical. China imports about 70% of its oil via the Strait of Hormuz, per the U.S. Energy Information Administration. Short-term closure harms China economically. Medium-term, it strengthens Gulf reliance on Beijing for security alternatives to Washington. As KPLR reported, China will likely increase dependence on Russian crude while Gulf supplies are interrupted, further solidifying the Russia-China energy axis. Most strikingly, Trump stated publicly at a press conference this week, "We're really helping China here. China gets a lot of their energy from the Straits. It's my honor to do it." The President of the United States describing a blockade of the world's most vital oil artery as a service to China during an active conflict at a press conference. Pause and absorb that. What does Israel seek? Israel initiated this campaign with the United States and has pursued the most aggressive targeting. Netanyahu's aim has remained consistent for years, permanently neutralizing Iran's capacity to threaten Israel, including its nuclear program, missile inventory, and regional proxy network. Those are long-range goals. Whether 2 weeks of airstrikes have accomplished them, or whether they demand prolonged operations that will keep reshaping the region, remains the central open question. What does Saudi Arabia seek? Riyadh wants to navigate the shift from a unipolar American security system to whatever emerges next. The kingdom denounced Iranian attacks on its soil. Its Sheba field was struck. Its refinery infrastructure targeted. Yet Iran's foreign minister publicly confirmed Saudi Arabia's pledge not to let its territory be used against Iran. Riyadh is walking an extraordinarily delicate line, not because it favors Iran, but because it no longer fully trusts that Washington prioritizes its long-term interests. The $142 billion defense package finalized last year, including F-35 access, now hangs in the balance with every gram threat, and Riyadh is acutely aware. 2 paths lie ahead. I see them plainly, though the timing on each remains genuinely uncertain. Path 1, Iran decides its leverage has reached its maximum. The military damage is substantial. The freshly appointed supreme leader must prove he can safeguard the regime without overseeing its total collapse. France, China, and Russia, all of which have approached Tehran about ceasefire terms, according to Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Gholam Ali Badi on state television, mediate a framework. The United States accepts an agreement allowing it to declare victory on nuclear aims, while Iran preserves regime continuity. The strait reopens. Oil drops to $70 or lower within weeks. Trump proclaims it the greatest foreign policy triumph since Reagan. Superficial alliance repairs occur. The deeper questions stay unexamined. Prerequisite: Iranian leaders must conclude that negotiating now, while still demonstrating capability, is wiser than continuing until forced regime change. That judgment demands rational actors under immense strain. It is feasible. Diplomatic channels remain open. Path 2, the strait stays blocked through March and into April. Oil climbs back above $120 and holds. Global recession odds rise steeply. OPEC's spare capacity, mostly in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, cannot reach markets because those nations cannot ship oil through a closed strait, and their pipeline workarounds, per KPLR analysis, cannot fully compensate. Russia's war effort receives fresh funding from elevated petrodollars. U.S. support for Ukraine quietly slips down the priority list. Iran's leadership rallies around resistance. America's domestic economic hardship becomes the dominant political narrative of 2026. And the alliance structure, not merely stressed, but structurally reordered, never fully reverts to its pre-war shape. I consider Path 2 more probable over the coming 2 to 3 weeks. I hope I am mistaken. The lasting harm to America's alliance credibility, Spain possibly reevaluating its NATO ties, Gulf states hastening their China orientation, European capitals constructing diplomatic exits that sidestep Washington, does not vanish when the fighting ceases. As multiple outlets have reported on the economic fallout, once supply chains adapt to new energy realities, and once nations forge fresh strategic alignments born from a crisis in which Washington excluded them, those arrangements do not simply revert. What I want to impress upon you is something not stated plainly enough in any coverage I have seen this week. These are uncomfortable questions, but they are the necessary ones. Here is what I ask you to address in the comments. Is Lindsey Graham functioning as Trump's authorized voice on this war, in which case his threats toward Saudi Arabia, Spain, and the UAE reflect official U.S. policy? Or has he become an uncontrolled figure whose television appearances are actively weakening Washington's diplomatic standing? Those two scenarios carry very different consequences for the conflict's trajectory. Do you view Saudi Arabia and the UAE as executing a lasting strategic shift away from the American security umbrella? Or is this a short-term tactical stance that will fade once the war concludes, with both sides quietly recognizing mutual dependence? This is the question I keep circling back to once the smoke clears, whichever path prevails. Which country emerges from this period structurally stronger? By today's visible measures, the answer is far from clear, and it may not match the outcome Washington expects. Share your thoughts in the comments. Pass this along to anyone who needs the complete context, like it if Daily Brief is delivering analysis you aren't finding elsewhere. We're staying right here. The story continues unfolding in real time. Stay with us.